What's up, guys? Welcome back to the show. I hope you've had a fantastic weekend. We don't have too much to cover outside of the ring, news-wise, at least no major breaking news. We definitely have a few stories and a few updates to cover for sure, but nothing truly groundbreaking or earth-shattering or anything like that, or no pipe bombs or anything of that nature this week. Like I said, we definitely, and for me personally, as a big fan of this individual, definitely have some big news to cover that had transpired within the past couple days itself, and we definitely have some injury updates and surgery updates and things like that. So we'll obviously cover that, and then we'll get into AEW Dynamite and the very perplexing show that was this past week, and kind of take a look at what's going on next week and a preview of the AEW Dynamite show next week, which is titled Road Rage, I believe, is their show. I think they're going to be in Missouri next week. I'll double check the location of that. But the Road Rager, I believe, is going to be headlined by Chris Jericho facing off against Ortiz in a hair versus hair match, which should be interesting, but we'll definitely cover that towards the end of today's show. But as always, I definitely appreciate you guys checking out the pod and the show, the support, the follows, the likes, and all that good stuff. I probably say it every week now, but it's still so cool to me to see the growth and the progression of the show and seeing exactly everywhere that you guys are at and that you're listening to it. So, again, I truly thank you guys for that. And if you want to follow the show on Twitter, definitely take a look and hit that follow button. We are at kickashpod_, and for me personally, it is at ASHMANNS. But we will not waste too much time and get into the show here. Probably, in my opinion, in the biggest news of this week, at least, especially within the past couple of days, was the news from Paige that she is going to be leaving WWE on July 7th. She officially released a statement on Twitter on Friday, June 10th, with a message just pretty much thanking WWE and addressing that she, of course, officially will be leaving on July 7th. So we'll read that here in a second. But she later on did follow up and kind of delve a little bit deeper on her Twitch channel as well. I'm not sure if it was later on that evening or maybe on Saturday, but she definitely did address a few other, I would say, big points as well, and kind of maybe shed some light on what her future may hold, and that she definitely does intend on getting back in the ring in the near future. And she kind of a brief overview. She hasn't officially been cleared medically yet, but she is on the verge to that status, and that is obviously a big goal of hers. So that is exciting to hear, especially like I mentioned earlier. I am a big fan of Paige. I'm sure most of us are. She, I think, was a pioneer and very a pivotal player when it comes to the transition in WWE from the Divas era and the Divas term and that phrase and what your diva, well, the standard idea, right, of what a diva was, and a women's wrestler in WWE, especially for a long stretch of time there. It wasn't necessarily about, or even at all, maybe I should be more blunt there, it didn't matter at all, your in-ring skills. The goal that they were looking for, and they even had a freaking competition for it. It was, what was it, the Divas Search? I don't even remember the exact wording of it, but for instance, that's how we got Maurice, which, again, I'm not saying it's necessarily a bad route to go, but when you're a wrestling company, you would think that you want people who actually want to be wrestlers and who have trained to be wrestlers and not necessarily are just models. But, what do I know? And that's a whole nother topic. But Paige broke the mold in that regard. She grew up a diehard fan of wrestling. If you guys haven't seen the video she has, I believe it was called Wrestling with My Family, that WWE had obviously a part in producing as well. And I believe The Rock was a producer or a director, or he had some type of main and big role in that movie itself, or at least not in the movie itself, but I think he did have his part, but like more so behind the scenes and the production of it and getting it up and running. So to say that WWE really, and to her credit, she does credit them as well for this, which, like I said, we'll reference here in a few moments, but they took her from a young age and put her through NXT, thankfully, and not just pretty much just bringing her straight to the main roster, right? They actually let her go to NXT For about 2 years in NXT. She was obviously part of the transition from FCW. At the time it was truly a developmental into the idea of what NXT was originally supposed to be, which is another form of developmental for WWE's main roster, obviously SmackDown and Raw, of course, but with a twist to get them TV ready, and they were doing tapings at Full Sail University at the time, which is pretty cool for me. Side note, it's like less than 10 minutes, like 7 minutes away from me, so I hope they do end up doing tapings again at Full Sail proper. But anyway, she ended up being in NXT for about, like I said, a total of 2 years. She was, of course, their inaugural NXT Women's Champion, which, looking back on, is really cool to think of everything that she accomplished in WWE. Or at least for me, like I mentioned earlier, I am a big fan of Paige and Saraya, of course, going forward now. But to think of everything that she accomplished and all the moments that she had is crazy that they being WWE, couldn't find something for her to do going forward, at least while she continues to heal. But I'll touch on that a little bit more going forward. But the biggest moment, or at least one of the biggest moments, I think, again, maybe another obvious pick in a lot of fans' eyes, if you've been a long-time WWE fan, or at least for the past, going on, close to 10 years now, was when Paige made her pretty surprising main roster debut on the Monday Night Raw after WrestleMania 30, which was probably one of the biggest WrestleManias in history, thinking back on it and everything that transpired at WrestleMania 30, which I still am a little bit bitter about, but this is not the time and the place to talk about WrestleMania 30. But she came out and pretty much congratulated the Divas champion AJ Lee, which, side note, I'm going to do a heavy pause here and go on one of my little side trails, but after July 7th, and Paige did reference as well, which I, again, will touch on in a second, guys, I promise, in her comments, I believe, on Twitch, that she will not have a non-compete clause after her contract expires, because it is essentially expiring, and that she is under the impression, at least as of the phone call that she had, that there will not be a non-compete clause. So as of essentially July 8th, if not July 7th itself, she is free to do whatever she wants. And to think that we are living in a world where AJ Lee is obviously a free agent, maybe not technically a free agent, but she is out there in the wrestling world, and back in the wrestling world, I should say, and embracing a wrestling role with the WOW organization, the Women's of Wrestling, right? And to think that Paige Saraya is going to be free in less than a month, again, it's pretty fucking crazy, guys. And obviously, I'm not saying that we're going to be getting a Paige and AJ Lee match within 2 months or anything like that, because she did mention that she technically is not medically cleared yet in regards to her neck. So I'm not rushing that or anything of that nature, but I'm just saying, at least in the meantime, just to see those two. For instance, let's say AJ Lee is doing a press conference, right, to promote, I believe they're doing tapings for their promotion, and I think they were looking to start airing the said tapings starting in September timeframe. But yeah, it does look like her official title with Women of Wrestling, AJ Lee, of course, is, as of right now, an executive producer, but she had recently, right around the time they wrapped up training, or maybe close to the end of their recent set of tapings, she posted this insane ripped photo of herself on Twitter. I don't know if you guys saw it. She's on Twitter at the AJ Mendez. But dude, she's fucking ripped. So she's obviously in shape. I don't know the true nature of her medical status, obviously. She is kind of private in that regard, or she had been up until the point of Women of Wrestling relaunching and getting back into the flow of things. So she obviously at this point is becoming more and more in the spotlight and doing more and more interviews and things like that. And I think recently she just did one with Renee Paquette as well, if I'm not mistaken, or God, I hope I'm not making that up, but I feel like I saw that somewhere, or she did an interview with someone recently. I should make a note to check that out later. But I didn't really intend on going on this side rant. But anyway, guys, long story short, I will wrap it up here. Just to think that we, like I said, live in a world that AJ Lee is in especially an executive producer role. I'm sure she obviously has ties to get Saraya, which we'll have to start referring to Paige as Paige going forward. Soraya Paige into the production, and even just a face-off, right? Let's just say AJ Lee is doing a press conference or something and outside, right, or in an arena or something, and Soraya Paige just shows up, just something, or even if it's planned or whatever. Again, not saying they have to do anything physical in the ring, just get Paige involved in wrestling, and she has a sick mind when it comes to wrestling, and she's just so full of knowledge, and the love and the passion for wrestling is just obvious if you listen to any interview or just see just the emotions that she would convey in the ring. And when she was on, was it Total Divas she was on? I believe one of those shows from WWE or Total Bellas or one of those things. But she was just always, it's just obvious she was there for the wrestling as a fan and because she loved the sport, not because she wanted a payday or anything like that, or she was a model and she won some contest. Again, no disrespect to them, just different mindsets and different intentions going into it, right? Or maybe different roads, I should say, going into it. But for that matter, Paige, guys, like, I could probably go on and on here, but the moment that she had debuting on Raw, like I said, on the Raw after WrestleMania 30, with AJ Lee and becoming the WWE Women's Champion at that point. It was still the Divas Championship, rather, I should say, correct myself. But it later went on to become officially the Women's Championship, rather. So between that, and I believe she was just at the age of like 21, I think, when she won her first Divas Championship on Raw. Like, can you guys imagine being fucking 21? Oh, and by the way, in a completely different country. You weren't born or raised in the United States. So, not saying she's an idiot, but it's a completely different world to her, right? I believe she had only been in the country maybe for 3 years at that point. So, you're still learning the ways, still learning a lot, you know. Like, thankfully the language isn't too different, just maybe some words and things like that, but for the most part it's pretty much the same. But like, just a lot, and you're still a child, you know, you're still a young adult growing up. Like, I know me personally, like, I would not have been responsible enough to be in that situation at 21, you know what I mean? Like, I don't think I would have been a complete idiot or anything like that, but I don't know if Ashley at 21 would have been able to handle the pressure and everything like that, and the fame and the finances and the responsibility that comes with not only being a star and being pushed as a star and being seen and taking precedence of and taking a big spot and a big role in the company at such a young age at 21. It was a big deal, and it showed a lot of the trust and the faith that the company had in her and her skill, obviously. You know, and again, the thing I loved about Paige, too, was she was different. Not only did she look different, but she just brought a different vibe and a different energy to her. When the whole "this is my house" like that, it fit. Like, it felt fitting for her. It didn't feel like it was some bullshit slogan that was made up and just slapped on to her, like creative wrestler type bullshit or anything like that. Like, it felt natural. It felt it didn't feel forced. It just felt real. So between that and the scream for her entrance, like, I just thought, like, her entrance too, like, and kudos to WWE as well. I believe it was still at that point the NXT team who created her entrance and her theme especially. But yeah, guys, just to think of the entirety of her career and like I said, the responsibility and the trust that the company put into her, and then to think of the tragic, abrupt, I don't want to say ending because it's obviously not permanently over, but when she went down with her first neck injury, we all thought that she was done, right? And again, she's still so fucking young. I think that was at what age, like 24 or something crazy like that. Could be off on the age for her first neck injury, but she went down with that, and we pretty much thought that she was done. And then she made her triumphant return. Everyone was super stoked to see her, and then she goes down again. I believe it was on a house match or something to that effect. Maybe it was in the ring with, I don't want to speculate. I don't remember exactly. I want to say it was like one of the Bella Twins, or I don't remember exactly, but it was just sad, you know. It was at an event that wasn't even televised, and it was just, I don't want to say a nothing event, but it was just, I don't know, it's just sad to think that her wrestling career, at least in WWE for that matter right now, is done, because once she went down with that second neck injury, WWE was pretty much at the point where they were like, okay, like, you're done in ring wise. But again, to their credit, and I will give them credit for this, they did try, at least for a little while. they did make her the SmackDown general manager and had her team up with Daniel Bryan in that role, in managerial roles, I should say, and try to get her to do something continuously on screen. She was a manager at one point with the Kabuki Warriors, which is crazy to think of now. It feels like a completely different lifetime. So they did try for, maybe a 2-year period, maybe on screen-wise. But then she just kind of faded to the back again, and they just, I don't want to say gave up, but there really wasn't much else that they allowed her to do on TV. They did, at one point, as the years went on, develop the Fox Sports show, what was it, Backstage? WWE Backstage or some, I forget the exact name. I know it was Backstage something. But that show was pretty monumental if you think about it. That was the official first, if you think about it, return to wrestling of CM Punk. It technically wasn't on WWE itself TV. It was still through Fox, and I believe his actual contract was through Fox Sports as well, and not necessarily with WWE themselves. But he was, of course, on there talking about WWE talent and television, and he had to be keeping up with the product to be on the show itself. That did not go as well as they originally planned. Of course, that was Paige, CM Punk, Renee Paquette, and Booker T had an appearance here and there at times. And they had, rotating special guests and things like that. But it wasn't due to the three of them, Paige, Renee, or Punk for that matter. And I think it got to a point also where Punk was not showing up every week. Let me backtrack. It wasn't that he was not showing up, but he wasn't scheduled weekly. It was more of I think like a once a month appearance, if I'm not mistaken, at some point. Obviously, I didn't keep up with it much myself. It was just on at a weird time, too. I think it was on like at 11 p.m. or something, to that matter. There was just a lot of things going against it. And then the biggest thing was the pandemic. Once the pandemic hit, it was almost impossible for them to continue with the show. So they ended up scrapping it. But I say that because it was a cool concept, and I give them credit for, again, putting Paige out there and on that show and giving her an opportunity in that regard to do something and to stay out there and to stay on the show and to stay, like I said, doing shit. And like I said, and I will get to this here now, she did give them credit as well. So, like I said, I will just pull up what she initially said on Twitter first, and then I'll kind of touch base on what she later revealed on Twitch later that evening or on Saturday at some point as well. But she says, Paige here, July 7th will be the last day with WWE. I'm so thankful and I appreciate the opportunities that the company has given me. I will always be appreciative of the company that took in an 18-year-old British pale emo girl that didn't look like your average diva, giving me the chance of a lifetime and making me feel like a superstar. I know after my neck injury taking me out of in-ring status, it was pretty hard to keep me around for as long as you did, and I'm thankful, and for that I am thankful too. Thank you to the WWE Universe. You guys are the most passionate group of fans I've ever seen. Hope you continue to stay on this journey with me. I think the toughest part, weirdly enough, is having to let the Paige name go, but Soraya is a hell of a name. Kudos to my mom for that one. Side note, I love the mom. FYI, I'm not saying I'll never be in the ring. That day will most certainly come again, wherever the return may be. Thank you, WWE, Soraya. Pretty sweet. Straight to the point, beginning, middle, the end. I loved it. Good for her. It was a very well done speech, or little, not necessarily speech, but just message, got to the point. But like I said, she did follow up on Twitch, which I will read some of the highlights here now in a second. And shout out to Fightful.com for the transcription of the majority of her comments here via Twitch. But at one point she said on Twitch that, quote, I knew it was coming eventually, getting the, hey, can I call you? I'm at SmackDown though. I'm like, that leaves no room for negotiation. They're probably not going to renew it in regards to her contract. I had a feeling for a while. I'm appreciative of WWE. They helped me so much. More than just wrestling, they got me a therapist when I was having drinking and alcohol issues. They kept me even after my neck injury, just sitting on my ass. I really appreciate that. I feel like I had so much love to give there as someone who can cut a decent promo into a managerial role. It is what it is. Which, again, like I mentioned earlier, she is fucking great on the mic and in that role. So, again, I definitely agree that they could have gotten more out of her in that regards. But she did continue to say, quote, I'm not leaving because I want to. They just don't want to re-sign my contract. I completely understand. There is no hard feelings. She did go on to continue to praise her work as, like I again mentioned earlier, as WWE SmackDown General Manager, and in regards to being removed from that role in 2018 and being split from the Kabuki Warriors, which again was Asuka and Kairi Sane, shout out Kairi, she was no longer pretty much a regular on television, and she went on to say, quote, "That's what I don't like. I was sitting around for a long time. I was texting them back in November like, what's the deal? Do you guys want me to resign? I'd rather get the ball rolling than wait until the last minute. That's the one thing I personally didn't like, the waiting around for no reason. They weren't using me to my full potential, that's for sure." She said, quote, "I broke my neck twice for this company just to be let go. I still tried to fight and to do something, and then to be told or to not be told until the last minute left me disappointed. Again, I understand their reasoning why they didn't want to renew the contract," unquote. She did continue to go on many times mentioning that it wasn't her decision to leave and that she did want to stay. And at one point she did say, quote, "It's fair. Are they going to keep employing me to do nothing for them? There are times I could have done, or there are things, I could have done. I just don't think that they want to think of it. They want to focus on people that are wrestling." She also did continue to reference, quote, "I offered to be the voice piece for Ronda," and unquote, which that would have been, I think, fucking great. Like the contrast there, just like I mentioned earlier, the passion and just the energy that Paige brings, and just the dominance and the forcefulness that Ronda could bring, because all literally Ronda would have to do is stand there in the ring with that look, that like pissed off, like baby look, almost, that face that Ronda has, which is a badass look. Like I mean that in all due respect, obviously. Like just you guys know that right before the bell rings, badass motherfucker look that Ronda has. Have that in the ring with, I'm kind of picturing like a Brock and a Paul Heyman thing as well, you know, like Brock is the beast standing there looking like a badass, which in place of Brock would be Ronda. And then you have Paul Heyman standing beside Brock being the just magnificent mouthpiece, and in place of Paul would be Paige. So, man, like I just think they dropped the ball with that one, if that in fact was pitched and they didn't go for it. But she did, and I'll wrap up here with the Paige portion of today's show. She was asked by, I guess, a fan on Twitch about going to AEW, and she did say, sure, if the money is right, and then laughed it off. But she mentioned that Twitch is her full-time job right now, and that she has actually thought about opening up a wrestling school, which, my goodness, please, if you open a wrestling school, make it in Orlando, Florida. Please. Yeah, just take my money now. But again, guys, I didn't really plan on spending this much time on Paige itself, but she, obviously enough, and like I mentioned earlier, was a big part of my wrestling fandom this past decade plus, at least for the wrestling, or the women's wrestling portion of it, for that matter. And she was just a big deal, you know. I think that she, again, like I mentioned, was one of the divas during a time where all the divas kind of looked the same, or it was the same concept. She was different. So shout out to WWE again for giving her the opportunity and giving her the platform and keeping her around for so long after her injury, which is kind of shitty that we have to say something like that. But again, I don't think this is the last time we see Paige specifically in WWE. I think this is just a goodbye for now type thing. Kind of go out there, continue to heal, probably pop up in AEW or whatever. You know, I would, again, like I mentioned earlier, I would love to see her in Women of Wrestling doing shit with AJ Lee to kind of see what they can do and their creative minds kind of come together. But I think AEW would kind of be foolish not to pick up Paige, even if it's just for her mind and to kind of be maybe like a locker room leader. And again, I may not know a lot of things behind the scenes, and I don't really care about the bullshit that you've heard out in her personal life that has nothing to do with her in-ring or her wrestling career, rather. Yeah, I think she would be a big asset, you know, and especially if it's just a matter of time before she can actually get back in the ring, I think she'd be a big coup. So shout out to Paige, Soraya, and obviously I will be continuing my journey with her as a fan, and I'm sure the majority of you guys, for that matter, will as well. But moving on here, we have an update on the American Nightmare Cody Rhodes. Brandy Rhodes tweeted that he underwent a successful surgery on Thursday, I believe it was. Yeah, on the 9th, which I believe was this past Thursday. It was pretty simple and straight to the point. She said the doctor just repaired Cody's pectoral tendon, which was torn completely off the bone. Successful surgery. He is on the road to recovery now. It was released, or later confirmed by WWE, just confirming the successful surgery itself, obviously, but then reported that he will be out for 9 months, which technically would have him out until next March, which is right in time for WrestleMania, but in my opinion, it's pretty obvious at this point, if you've been a long-time fan of WWE, whenever someone is going to be out for X amount of time, let's say, realistically, they're just going to be out, 5-6 months, WWE adds 3-4 months onto it so they can make a surprise return when you're not expecting them to. So, and I get it, and it's fun, and I don't blame them at all for that. And for that matter, too, it kind of covers yourself as well. If there is, in fact, any hiccups in the recovery or anything like that, it gives you extra cushion so you're not saying someone's going to be back in January when realistically they shouldn't be back until March or something like that, you know what I mean? So I get why they do it. But in my mind, it just lines him up, and like I mentioned, I believe it was last week, it lines it up perfectly for his return for the Royal Rumble. And it lines him up to obviously win the Rumble and then head straight to the main event of WrestleMania. And I think, oddly enough, it couldn't have happened better. I think, and I explained it last week, so I won't waste too much time here repeating the same information, but I think that it kind of worked out best for Cody. He's not going to be kind of just like kicking the rocks down the road or anything like that, or just doing bullshit feuds or anything of that nature. We got his big return at WrestleMania. He had a solid feud with Seth Rollins in essentially a best of three. Not necessarily a best of three because Cody won all three, but a 3-match series, which was phenomenal. And I think we really got just the best version of Cody Rhodes, and I think the best opponent to start with Cody Rhodes in regards to Seth Rollins. So again, I will praise Seth Rollins to the end of the show if I needed to, because that man, he's really done a lot for WWE and for Cody Rhodes for that matter. And in WWE for the pandemic time frame, I mean, my goodness, he's, in my opinion, one of the MVPs, especially during the beginning and the heart of the pandemic time frame itself. But to think that Cody now is going to be able to sit out the summer, and I don't mean that, and like he's just like sitting on his ass not doing anything, obviously he's injured, but to think that he's going to, you get your big return, right? You get your substantial feud to prove yourself. You even get a probably legendary match and a legend-making moment match, and being able to go in there and fight with a brutal and gruesome injury and be able to show everyone how much this means to you, how much of a badass you are, and what you're willing to put your body through to be the best and to become champion eventually at one point. And then to have this triumphant return. Once you go out on injury, you're out, you come back quicker than originally expected. You make this big surprise return at the Royal Rumble. You win the Royal Rumble. You have this great promo following up on Raw. You know it's going to be, you know that if he wins the Royal Rumble, you know that promo on Raw is going to be, he's going to be in tears. And to think of between the moment of Cody, let's say, hypothetically speaking, guys, let's say he does win the Royal Rumble. He has his moment on Raw the following night after to stake his claim, to, again, reiterate why the title means what it does to him, why he, his family, legacy, all that good stuff, right? He goes to WrestleMania in the main event and wins the titles. If it's still both titles at the same point, or even if it's just one title, it doesn't matter. As long as it's the WWE Championship, this man is going to just cry every ounce of liquid in his body. Like, he is just going to lose his mind. It's just going to be one of those moments. And I think the Raw after that Mania, if they don't open with him being the champion and that emotional moment and hearing the opening sound of wrestling has more than one royal family and having him come out as the champion, and just, I would love to even see, and I know I'm obviously getting way ahead of myself, but I would even love to see him come out, after the fireworks and everything. Don't have him come out yet, but once the fireworks and everything go off on the initial part of his entrance and the smoke clears, have him walk out with his baby. Cody is a family man. He just introduced, not visually, but introduced Liberty, his daughter, to us on TV and kind of drop that seed. So to have it kind of come full picture and to wrap up and to have this moment, if regardless on if he brings all the way into the ring or just on stage. But to get that visual of him on stage, at least with the title, and to have his daughter there would just be a beautiful moment. And you can even throw Brandy on there as well if you want to. I think that would be very cool as well. But just in regards to the lineage of the blood of the Rhodes family, you know, to see Cody there, the visual of the title, so that kind of, you know, in his, you know, the presence of his father would be there too. You know what I mean? Like, just the whole, if you believe in that thing, like I don't know, just the whole moment itself, and then to see him looking at his daughter, I just think it would be beautiful. I think it would be a great moment. So again, I know I'm getting way ahead of myself, and this was just going to be an injury update, but I think WWE really kind of got a silver lining in this dark cloud here, and I think Cody Rhodes especially did as well. And kudos to him. He deserves to have the summer off. I mean, I know he's obviously going to be in pain recovering, but he deserves to have this time off to heal and recover and to come back as a star.